January 15, 2026. While Wall Street was distracted by earnings season, a geopolitical transaction unfolded that reveals exactly how modern resource diplomacy actually works. The price tag, $2.75 billion in Venezuelan oil. The cost, principles. I'm Marcus Caldwell, and what I'm about to walk you through isn't speculation. This is verified by the Associated Press, CNN, Washington Post, all with named sources confirming a resource deal that rewrites the playbook on how energy assets trump democratic ideals. Here's the setup. Venezuela holds some of the world's largest proven oil reserves, potentially exceeding Saudi Arabia's. For years, U.S. sanctions locked American companies out, designed to pressure the Maduro regime. Then January 3, 2026, U.S. Delta Force captures Nicolas Maduro in a covert operation. The dictator is now in federal custody facing narco-terrorism charges. Venezuela's National Assembly, still controlled by Maduro loyalists, immediately swears in Delcy Rodríguez as acting president. Rodríguez was Maduro's vice president from 2018 to 2026. She ran the regime apparatus for 8 years. Now here's where the financial intelligence gets critical. According to the Associated Press, the DEA has maintained an intelligence file on Rodríguez since at least 2018. She was designated a priority target in 2022. Nearly a dozen active DEA investigations span field offices in Paraguay, Ecuador, Phoenix, and New York. The allegations include drug trafficking connections, gold smuggling networks, money laundering operations. A confidential DEA informant reported in 2021 that Rodríguez was using hotels in Isla Margarita as fronts to launder money. The DEA documented her connections to Alex Saab, Maduro's alleged bagman, who was convicted on money laundering charges in 2023. 3 former DEA agents confirmed to the AP there was intense interest in Rodríguez throughout her time as vice president. Rob Zachariah, former DEA agent now at a private intelligence firm, stated on the record, "Venezuela is a failed state that supports terrorism, corruption, human rights abuses, and drug trafficking at the highest echelons. Delcy Rodríguez has been part of this criminal enterprise." Critically, Rodríguez has never been publicly charged. But the file exists, the investigations continue, and that creates leverage. Before I show you how this leverage converted into an energy deal, if this kind of geopolitical market intelligence is valuable to you, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This channel exists to decode how resource diplomacy actually functions behind the diplomatic language. Your subscription directly supports independent financial analysis that connects geopolitical events to market implications. Now let's examine the transaction structure. Same day Maduro was captured, January 3rd, the Venezuelan National Assembly installed Rodríguez. January 14th, Trump calls Rodríguez directly. Fox News reported the call was positive. January 15th, CYA. Director John Ratcliffe boards a plane to Caracas. 2-hour meeting with Rodríguez. CIA statement afterward. At President Trump's direction, Director Ratcliffe met with Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodríguez and discussed potential opportunities for economic collaboration. Notice what's absent from that statement. No mention of elections, democratic transition, or civilian rule. Economic collaboration and security cooperation. That's the framework. Former U.S. officials told CNN this meeting signaled Trump's willingness to work directly with the Maduro regime apparatus, not replace it, as long as they provide what he wants. What he wants is oil access. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced on January 6th the U.S. will take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil that Venezuela has already produced. Let me show you the math. Venezuelan oil currently trades around $55 per barrel. 30 million barrels times $55 equals $1.65 billion. 50 million barrels times $55 equals $2.75 billion. Where does this oil come from? Venezuela has approximately 48 million barrels in onshore storage facilities at near full capacity. They have between 15 and 22 million barrels in seized tankers, vessels caught trying to smuggle Venezuelan oil despite sanctions. Total available inventory, roughly 70 million barrels. Trump is taking up to 50 million, more than two-thirds of available supply. Marco Rubio stated the U.S. will sell it in the marketplace. Buyers pay market price. Revenue goes to the U.S. government first. Energy Secretary Chris Wright said the money will eventually be used to stabilize Venezuela's economy. Eventually. First, it goes to the U.S. Treasury. Trump justified this by claiming Venezuela stole American oil when they nationalized in the 1970s. Here's the actual timeline. Venezuela nationalized its oil industry in 1976. 20 foreign companies, including American firms, received about $1 billion in compensation in 1977. That deal was settled. Then in 2007, Hugo Chavez did a second nationalization. ExxonMobil sued, won $98 million in 2012, won another $1.6 billion in 2014. ConocoPhillips sued, won $2 billion in 2018, won $8.7 billion in 2019. But Venezuela never fully paid those arbitration awards, so there are legitimate claims. But Trump isn't waiting for courts or negotiations. He's taking the oil directly. And Rodriguez is letting him because she doesn't have a choice. If she resists, Trump has publicly stated she would pay a very big price, probably bigger than Maduro. Translation: we have DEA files, cooperate or face indictment. David Smildy, professor at Tulane University and Venezuela expert, told reporters, just being a leader in a highly corrupted regime for over a decade makes it logical that she is a priority target for investigation. She surely knows this, and it gives the U.S. government leverage over her. So the deal structure is clear. Rodriguez provides total access to vast oil reserves and natural resources. That's the direct quote from Trump's demand, total access. In exchange, Rodriguez gets U.S. recognition, stays in power, avoids prosecution, at least for now. No elections required, no democratic process, just oil for recognition. Now here's the market implication you need to understand. This sets a precedent for how resource-rich nations under authoritarian control can structure deals with the U.S. If you have strategic commodities, oil, lithium, rare earths, copper, you can negotiate from a position of strength even with corruption allegations, as long as you provide market access. For investors, this means several things. First, Venezuelan oil potentially flooding the market could pressure global crude prices. If 50 million barrels hit the market over the next 6 months, that's incremental supply competing with OPEC production. Watch WTI and Brent crude pricing for downward pressure in Q1 and Q2 of 2026. Second, American oil service companies that were locked out of Venezuela for years now have potential re-entry. Halliburton, Schlumberger, Baker Hughes all operated in Venezuela before sanctions. If total access means service contracts, these companies could see revenue growth from previously sanctioned markets. Third, this reinforces the trend of resource nationalism evolving into resource deal-making. Countries with commodities the U.S. needs, whether it's Venezuelan oil, Congolese cobalt, or Indonesian nickel, they're learning that strategic resources provide negotiating power regardless of governance issues. For commodity traders, this creates a new risk premium. Geopolitical stability used to be a binary calculation, sanctions on or off. Now it's more complex. You have to assess whether a regime can cut a deal that bypasses traditional diplomatic processes. That changes how you model supply disruption risk. Fourth, the DEA investigation angle creates ongoing uncertainty. Rodriguez cooperates now because the alternative is indictment. But investigations don't disappear. They pause. If the relationship sours, if Venezuela doesn't deliver on commitments, those files can resurface. That's a political risk factor that doesn't exist with traditional energy partners. Fifth, this deal completely bypasses multilateral institutions. No World Bank involvement, no IMF structural adjustment, no international election observers. This is bilateral resource extraction, with security cooperation as the framework. That's a model other nations will study and potentially replicate. Now let's talk about what didn't happen, because that's equally important for understanding market dynamics. Maria Corina Machado won the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize for her work promoting Venezuelan democracy. She spent 11 months in hiding after winning 93% of the vote in Venezuela's opposition primary. January 15th, same day as the CYA meeting in Caracas, Machado was in Washington. She gave Trump her actual Nobel Peace Prize medal in a golden frame as thanks for removing Maduro. She believed democracy was coming. Senator Chris Murphy confirmed after meeting with her that she received no commitment from the administration on elections. She gave her Nobel Prize, got nothing in return. Why does this matter for markets? Because a democratic transition would have required elections, constitutional process, transitional government. That creates uncertainty, delays resource access, potentially changes contract terms if new leadership wants to renegotiate. Rodríguez provides immediate access with no democratic complications. From a pure transaction efficiency perspective, working with the existing regime apparatus is faster, but it also means the structural issues that cause millions of Venezuelans to flee as refugees, those issues persist. If the regime stays in place with just a new face, the refugee crisis continues. That has implications for regional stability, immigration policy, and labor markets in countries absorbing Venezuelan migration. For investors in Latin American markets, this is a contagion risk indicator. Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Brazil, all dealing with Venezuelan refugee populations. If this deal stabilized the regime without addressing root causes, those migration pressures increase. Here's what's likely to unfold over the next 6 to 12 months. Rodríguez will consolidate power using U.S. recognition to legitimize her government. The oil will flow. American companies might eventually receive some compensation, but the immediate beneficiary is the U.S. government. $2.75 billion in oil revenue. The DEA investigations will quietly remain open but inactive. You don't indict someone you're doing business with. Elections might happen eventually, but they'll be controlled by the regime apparatus, like every Venezuelan election under Chávez and Maduro. The appearance of democracy without the substance, and the precedent is set. Future authoritarian regimes with strategic resources learn the lesson. If you have commodities America needs, you can structure a deal. Governance issues become negotiable rather than disqualifying. For investors, this creates a new category of frontier market opportunities. Countries previously off-limits due to sanctions or governance concerns could become accessible if they have resources the U.S. wants and leadership willing to deal. That expands the investable universe, but also increases political risk complexity. You're not just analyzing economic fundamentals and market dynamics anymore. You're analyzing whether a regime can maintain enough stability to deliver on resource commitments while managing domestic opposition and potential international backlash. That's a different risk model than traditional emerging market analysis. Let me synthesize the actionable intelligence. 1. Monitor WTI and Brent crude for downward pricing pressure as Venezuelan oil enters the market. 2. Watch American oil service companies for potential Venezuela re-entry announcements. 3. Assess commodity exposure in your portfolio for similar geopolitical deal structures in other resource-rich authoritarian markets. 4. Factor in elevated political risk premiums for Venezuelan assets due to ongoing DEA investigations, creating conditional stability. 5. Evaluate Latin American equities for refugee crisis spillover effects if regime continuity perpetuates migration drivers. This is how modern resource diplomacy functions. Democratic ideals as stated policy, resource access as actual priority. The market moves on commodities, not principles. $2.75 billion in oil. That's the transaction value of this geopolitical shift. Subscribe to this channel for ongoing analysis as this deal develops and its market implications unfold. Hit the notification bell because when major resource diplomacy events break, you'll understand the financial implications before the market fully prices them in. This is the Equity Edge, where we decode how the world actually works behind the diplomatic language. The history being made here isn't about liberation or democracy. It's about energy assets, leverage, and the price of strategic resources. In this case, $2.75 billion. That's what principles cost when oil is on the table.